I never imagined I'd be sitting here at the Metropolitan, one of the city's most exclusive restaurants, about to have my world turned upside down. The crystal chandelier sparkled above our private dining room, casting an elegant glow that felt almost mocking given what was about to unfold. Nathan, my husband, had been right to be concerned when my parents suddenly reached out after 13 years of minimal contact, claiming they needed to discuss something important. "Laurel, you look well," my mother Regina said, her perfectly manicured hands adjusting the wine glass. "The library work must agree with you." I could feel the familiar knot forming in my stomach. Any mention of my career from my mother usually came with an underlying tone of disappointment. My sister Victoria, the investment banking little V, sat across from me, wearing what I recognized as a Chanel suit that probably cost more than my monthly salary. "We ordered the 82 Bordeaux," my father Harrison announced, his voice carrying that authoritative tone I remembered from childhood. "A special occasion deserves a special wine." Special occasion. Those words should have been my first warning. Nathan squeezed my hand under the table, his presence anchoring me as it had for the past decade. As a clinical psychologist, he must have already sensed the tension building in the room. Victoria leaned forward, her expression serious. "Laurel, we need to talk about something significant. Something that could help bring our family closer together." The waiter arrived with the wine, the ceremony of opening and pouring giving me a moment to steady my nerves. I watched the dark liquid swirl in my glass, remembering all the family dinners where I'd been compared to Victoria, the golden child, the perfect daughter who could do no wrong. If only I'd known then that this wasn't just another family dinner. This was the beginning of a nightmare that would force me to finally confront the twisted dynamics that had shaped our family for decades. Family history. Victoria had always been my parents' vision of perfection personified. Growing up, it wasn't just about her achievements. It was about the narrative they built around her. She was their golden child, a title they never tired of proclaiming at every country club gathering or family event. Victoria's presentation to the board was exceptional. My father would boast at dinner parties. The youngest vice president in her firm's history. "And did you see her feature in Business Weekly?" My mother would chime in, conveniently forgetting I was in the room. "That's our Victoria, Stanford MBA, top of her class." Even now, watching her sit perfectly poised in her Chanel suit at the Metropolitan, I could see that carefully cultivated image. Victoria had mastered the art of appearing flawless. The sleek Manhattan apartment, the executive position, the carefully curated social media presence that showed a life of elegant dinner parties and charity galas. I was the unexpected addition to their perfect family narrative, arriving 2 years after Victoria. Being unexpected wasn't my only transgression. I was born premature, with a congenital heart condition that required multiple surgeries throughout my early years. The hospital corridors became my second home, the beeping of medical monitors a constant soundtrack to my childhood. "We could have renovated the lake house if it weren't for all these medical bills," my mother would sigh, loud enough for me to hear from my hospital bed. "Victoria's college fund would have been even more substantial without all these hospital stays," my father would add, as if I had chosen to be born with a defective heart. My grandparents, Walter and Margaret Cooper, covered most of the medical expenses that insurance didn't, but that didn't stop my parents from wielding those bills like weapons, reminders of how I had disrupted their perfect lives. The contrast in how they treated us was stark and painful. While my small victories at the library went unnoticed, Victoria's routine business deals were celebrated with champagne and lavish gifts. Looking at her now, in this expensive restaurant, I could see the same pattern continuing. Victoria, the successful investment banker, still commanding all of our parent attention and pride, while I, the children's librarian with a mere community college degree, remained the family disappointment. Childhood memories. One memory stands out with particular clarity. My piano recital when I was 12. I'd practiced for months, my fingers moving carefully across the keys, despite my occasional hospital stays. It was supposed to be my moment, the one time I could show I was capable of something special too. "Mom, you'll be there, right?" I'd asked repeatedly in the weeks leading up to it. "Of course, darling." We wouldn't miss it, she'd promised. But the morning of the recital, Victoria had an unexpected student council meeting. Just like that, my moment evaporated. "Your sister needs us there," my mother explained, not meeting my eyes. This could affect her college applications. I performed to an audience of strangers, my grandparents, the only familiar faces in the crowd. Victoria knew her position as the golden child and wielded it like a weapon. When I was 16, my birthday celebration was postponed because Victoria had just received her early acceptance to Stanford. "We need to celebrate while the news is fresh," my mother had exclaimed, while my birthday cake sat forgotten in the refrigerator. The everyday moments were even more telling than these big events. I still remember the day Victoria shoved me down the stairs after I accidentally brushed against her science project. The bruise on my back lasted for weeks, a dark purple reminder of my place in the family hierarchy. "You should be more careful around Victoria's things," was all my mother said when she saw the bruise. No punishment for Victoria, no concern for my pain. Just another reminder that I was worth less than her science project. School became my only escape, but even that was a struggle. My heart condition meant frequent absences, trying to keep up with assignments from hospital beds, while Victoria maintained her perfect GPA and excelled in every extracurricular activity. Why can't you be more like Victoria? Victoria never struggles with her assignments. Victoria doesn't cause us this much worry. The comparisons were endless, each one a paper cut to my already wounded self-esteem. By high school, I'd mastered the art of being invisible. It was easier that way. Victoria had her crowd of friends, her trajectory to a prestigious university, living the life our parents had always dreamed of for their children. Meanwhile, I was just trying to survive each day without feeling like a complete failure. During my hospital stays, I found solace in books, losing myself in stories where underdogs could triumph, and where being different wasn't a curse. Perhaps that's what led me to become a children's librarian, the desire to provide that same comfort to other children who felt out of place. College years and marriage. College became my lifeline, my chance to escape. I still remember the day I pleaded with my grandparents, Walter and Margaret, to help me attend a university several states away. They'd watched the family dynamic unfold for years, witnessed every slight and dismissal, and understood my desperate need for distance. "You deserve your own path, Laurel," Grandma Margaret had said, her eyes filled with understanding as she wrote the check for my tuition. It was at the community college library where I met Nathan. He was completing his psychology doctorate, researching for his thesis on family trauma. The irony wasn't lost on me. Unlike everyone else I'd known, he saw me, not as Victoria's lesser sister, but as my own person. "Tell me about your dreams," he'd asked on our first date, showing genuine interest in my passion for children's literature and education. For the first time in my life, I felt seen and valued for who I was. Nathan's quiet strength and empathy created a safe space where I could finally breathe. After graduation, we married in a small ceremony. Victoria and my parents barely acknowledged it. No card, no attendance, not even a perfunctory congratulation. I didn't expect them to come, I told Nathan, but the pain was still there. Nathan's mother stepped in, helping me choose my wedding dress, sharing the mother-daughter moments I'd always yearned for. "You're family now," she'd said, hugging me tight. And we celebrate family. Pregnancy complications. A few years into our marriage, we decided to try for a child. The conversation with my cardiologist was serious. Mrs. Mitchell, pregnancy would put significant strain on your heart, Dr. Anderson had warned. The risks are considerable. But we wanted to try. The pregnancy was brutal. Multiple hospitalizations, constant monitoring, my heart struggling under the added burden. Nathan never left my side, sleeping in uncomfortable hospital chairs, advocating fiercely with medical staff when needed. The delivery nearly killed me. I remember the emergency alarms, the rush of medical personnel, Nathan's terrified face, and then darkness. When I woke up, our son Oliver was healthy and perfect, but the message from my doctors was clear and non-negotiable. Another pregnancy would likely be fatal, Dr. Anderson stated firmly. Your heart simply cannot handle it. Nathan and I built our life around our small, precious family. I found joy in my work at the library, reading to children, watching Oliver grow. We created new traditions, Sunday board game nights, bedtime stories, weekend picnics in the park. My contact with Victoria and my parents dwindled to occasional holiday cards and brief phone calls. The distance was healing. Then came last week's dinner invitation to the Metropolitan, and with it, the shattering of our hard-won peace. The Metropolitan confrontation. The waiter had just cleared our appetizer plates when Victoria placed a thick envelope on the white tablecloth. The crystal chandelier's light caught the expensive paper, making it seem to glow. We've been talking with some specialists, Victoria began, her manicured fingers tapping the envelope. Top fertility experts. My father cleared his throat, swirling his expensive Bordeaux. We've already handled all the legal aspects. The best attorneys in Manhattan have reviewed everything. That's when they pushed the envelope toward me. Inside wasn't just a letter. It was a surrogacy agreement. My hands began to shake as I read the documents, each word feeling like a physical blow. Victoria had been struggling with infertility, and they wanted me, their defective, disappointing daughter, to be her surrogate. The doctors say you're a perfect match, my mother added, as if discussing a business transaction. They've reviewed your case. What case? Nathan's voice was sharp. Which doctors? I felt the room spinning slightly. They knew about my heart condition. They knew I had nearly died giving birth to Oliver. They had sent flowers to the hospital, roses for the room I spent 3 days in intensive care. This is impossible, I managed to say, my voice barely a whisper. My cardiologist has explicitly forbidden another pregnancy. It could kill me. Victoria's perfectly composed face showed a flicker of irritation. Dr. Brennan at the fertility clinic says the risks are manageable. Manageable? Nathan's knuckles were white around his water glass. Did you share Laurel's complete medical history with Dr. Brennan? How can you be so selfish? My mother's voice cracked with practiced emotion. Victoria has always wanted to be a mother. This is her only chance. The word selfish echoed in my head, a familiar accusation from childhood. My father leaned forward, his authoritative banker's voice in full effect. After everything this family has done for you, you owe us this much. Done for me? The words burst out before I could stop them. What exactly have you done? Grandma and Grandpa paid for my medical bills. Nathan and his family gave me emotional support. All you and Victoria ever did was remind me that I'd never be good enough. Tears were streaming down my mother's face now. I don't even recognize you anymore. The daughter I raised would understand family obligation. The daughter you raised? Nathan's calm therapist demeanor was cracking. You mean the daughter you systematically dismissed in favor of Victoria? I stood up, my legs unsteady. The elegant dining room felt suffocating. I have a 6-year-old son who needs his mother alive. I won't risk orphaning him to fulfill Victoria's desires. You're being dramatic, Victoria snapped. Dr. Brennan says. Dr. Brennan doesn't know my full medical history. I cut her off. And I won't die to give you what you want. Not anymore. Nathan stood beside me, his presence steady and protective. We left the restaurant with my mother's accusations of selfishness echoing behind us. In the car, I finally broke down, sobs racking my body as Nathan held me. They want me to die, I whispered. They actually want me to risk dying for Victoria. No. Nathan's voice was firm. What they want doesn't matter anymore. You're not their sacrificial lamb, Laurel. You're my wife, Oliver's mother, and a person worthy of life in your own right. The aftermath, 1 week later. My phone hasn't stopped buzzing since that night at the Metropolitan. Victoria's messages arrive like perfectly aimed arrows, each one crafted to hit where it hurts most. Remember how I always looked out for you when we were kids? I almost laughed at that one. Her version of our childhood must exist in some parallel universe where pushing your sister down the stairs counts as protection. This is my last chance to have my own child. I've always dreamed of being a mother. Mom was right about you. You've always only thought about yourself. I guess nearly dying in childbirth is just your excuse for not helping me. Each notification makes my hands shake. I've started keeping my phone face down while reading to the children at the library, trying to maintain my composure as I navigate through Where the Wild Things Are and Goodnight Moon. Family pressure intensifies. My mother has been particularly ruthless in her campaign. She's been calling every relative who will listen, painting me as some heartless monster who refuses to help her dying sister. Except Victoria isn't dying. She's just unable to conceive naturally. You're destroying Victoria's only chance at happiness, her voice message declared, theatrical tears evident in her tone. This morning, my father's message went too far. You've always been a disappointment, but this is a new low. This is how you repay us for giving you life. By denying your sister the chance to be a mother. Nathan found me in Oliver's room, sitting on the floor surrounded by storybooks, trying to ground myself in the familiar scent of children's literature and crayons. I had to stop myself from driving to their house, he admitted, sitting beside me. They're acting like Victoria's desire for a biological child is more important than your actual risk of death. This isn't just about you anymore, Nathan reminded me gently. It's about Oliver. He needs his mother alive and well. No one has the right to demand you take that risk. Social media warfare. The situation escalated when Victoria took to Instagram. Her perfectly curated feed now includes subtle jabs at selfish siblings and posts about the pain of infertility made worse by family betrayal. My mother's sisters have joined in, sharing cryptic Facebook posts about the importance of sacrifice for family. I've started receiving messages from distant relatives I haven't seen since childhood, expressing their disappointment in my choices, as if they have any right to weigh in on whether I should risk leaving my son motherless. Only my cousin Audrey reached out with a different message. I remember how they treated you growing up. They're being insane. Don't let them guilt you into this. Nathan and I had a long talk last night about our next steps. We're blocking their numbers, he decided, his voice firm but gentle. All of them, Victoria, your parents, even the flying monkeys they've sent after you. The only exceptions are your grandparents. They've always been supportive. We're also exploring legal protections. Nathan's worried they might try something desperate. Their behavior has become increasingly hostile. We have an appointment with a lawyer next week to discuss our options. Looking at Oliver sleeping peacefully in his race car bed, I feel no guilt about refusing Victoria. He needs his mother alive and present, not sacrificed on the altar of my sister's desires. I'm done letting them manipulate me. A good mother wouldn't risk orphaning her child to appease people who have never truly loved her. Blue Note Cafe confrontation. The Blue Note Cafe was my choice. Neutral territory with plenty of witnesses. My mother had reached me through a temporary number, insisting we needed to talk. Just us, without Nathan. Every instinct screamed this was a bad idea, but I agreed. Nathan waited in his car across the street, ready to intervene if needed. Rain tapped against the cafe's windows as I watched my mother's Mercedes pull up. She looked immaculate as always, not a hair out of place. Victoria emerged from the passenger side, an unexpected addition to our Just Us meeting. I chose a window seat, positioned to see Nathan's car. The waitress had just set down 3 untouched lats when my mother launched into what was clearly a rehearsed speech. Victoria is dying from the agony of not being able to have children, she began. No hello, no how are you, just straight to emotional manipulation. The doctors say this is her last chance. She slid a business card across the table. Dr. Brennan says you two are a perfect match. They can monitor your cardiac health carefully. My own cardiologist, the one who's managed my condition for years, has explicitly forbidden another pregnancy, I replied, watching the steam rise from my untouched drink. It could kill me. Doctors are always overly cautious, my mother dismissed with a wave of her manicured hand. Dr. Brennan says the risks are manageable. Victoria sat there, perfectly poised in her designer outfit, her eyes fixed on her phone as she presumably documented my cruelty for her social media followers. The conversation took a darker turn when my mother started discussing family legacy and how Victoria deserved to pass on her superior genes. I'd heard these arguments my entire life, the constant reminder of my defective existence. I should have known you'd be difficult about this, she sighed as I stood to leave. You've always been jealous of Victoria. This is your chance to finally do something for the family. The rain had intensified as I walked out, but I felt strangely calm. For the first time, I saw my mother clearly, not as a parent who didn't love me enough, but as someone who had never seen me as a person at all. Just a tool for Victoria's benefit. How did it go? Nathan asked when I got to the car, his voice gentle. They're not worth it, I replied, watching the cafe shrink in the rearview mirror. They never were. I sent one final message that evening. I won't risk leaving my child motherless to fulfill Victoria's wishes. This is not up for discussion. Don't contact me again. Nathan helped me change my number the next day. Sometimes, walking away completely is the only way to win. The truth emerges. My father's threatening messages from various numbers grew increasingly hostile in the week after the cafe incident. The latest one chilled me to the bone. Your mother is heartbroken. Victoria is in pieces. You've left us no choice. There are consequences for actions. My grandmother Margaret called, her voice trembling. I overheard your parents talking to a lawyer. They're looking for legal ways to force this. They're talking about family obligation laws and medical rights. Victoria's fertility specialist claims the risks are manageable, and they think they can challenge your own doctor's opinion. She hesitated before adding, Theodore, Victoria's husband, he's actually against their plan. He thinks risking someone's life for this is insane, but Victoria and your parents have essentially shut him out of the conversation. Legal protection. I immediately called my doctor's office to lock down my medical records with additional security measures. Then I contacted 3 family law firms. The third one was exactly what we needed. The lawyer's face darkened as she heard our story. They cannot legally force you to be a surrogate. This would be considered reproductive coercion, and no court would allow it. But we need to be proactive. She's helping us draft cease and desist letters and prepare restraining order documentation. We're documenting every message, call, and contact attempt. Nathan's company's legal insurance is covering most of our expenses, but as he said last night, I'd sell my car if I had to. Your safety is worth everything we have. The final revelation. Just when I thought this nightmare was ending, two shocking developments occurred. First, my lawyer received a letter from Victoria's fertility clinic. My parents had attempted to conceal my heart condition by falsifying medical records. The clinic is filing a report about this illegal attempt at medical fraud. Then Theodore, Victoria's husband, had finally had enough. He exposed everything in the family group chat, how my parents and Victoria had conspired to hide my medical condition from the doctors. He revealed that Victoria knew about my near-death experience during Oliver's birth, but had deliberately kept it from everyone. The response from the extended family was immediate. The aunts and cousins who had been condemning me fell silent. My aunt from Texas called in tears, claiming she had no idea about the medical fraud attempt. Several family members have cut contact with my parents and Victoria, describing their actions as criminally unhinged. Theodore filed for divorce last week, stating he couldn't remain married to someone who would commit fraud and endanger her sister's life. My parents' perfect narrative about their precious child finally shattered. Victoria and my parents have been banned from all medical facilities associated with the fertility clinic. My lawyer says they could face serious legal consequences for their attempted medical fraud. New beginnings. Last night, Oliver asked me why we don't see Grandma and Grandpa anymore. I explained that sometimes we have to stay away from people who don't respect our boundaries, even if they're family. He thought about it for a moment, then said, "Like when Tommy at school doesn't stop when I say no." "Exactly like that, sweetheart," I replied, my heart swelling with love for my perceptive little boy. This whole experience has taught me that true family isn't always about shared DNA. It's about the people who love you unconditionally, who respect your right to live, who value your presence beyond what you can do for them. Nathan and I have started new traditions with Oliver. Our Sunday board game nights have become sacred family time. Sometimes my grandparents join us, though they're careful to keep it secret from my parents. Looking at my son laughing with Nathan over Candyland, I finally understand. This is how family should feel: safe, loving, accepting. I've finally given that scared little girl who used to hide in hospital rooms what she always needed: protection from those who never valued her life. The truth really does set you free. While I never sought revenge, watching their perfect facade crumble under the weight of their own actions feels like poetic justice. All I wanted was to be left alone to live my life with the people who truly love me. Epilogue. 1 month has passed since Theodore exposed the truth. My new private social media account and unlisted phone number have given me a peace I've never known before. Our home feels lighter somehow, as if the shadows of my past have finally lifted. My grandmother passed along what will likely be my mother's final message to me: "You've disappointed this family for the last time. You chose your selfishness over Victoria's happiness. Don't expect to be welcomed back." Strangely, reading those words brought relief rather than pain. They finally voiced what I'd always known: that my only value to them was what I could do for Victoria. This morning, my lawyer called with news that made everything crystal clear. Victoria's fertility clinic had contacted her, wanting to state explicitly that they had never authorized surrogacy agreements involving someone with my cardiac condition. It seems neither Victoria nor my parents had ever disclosed my heart condition. A final confirmation of their complete disregard for my life. The most unexpected outcome? The absence of anxiety when my phone rings. No more dread about family gatherings. No more persistent feelings of inadequacy. Nathan says I'm laughing more freely now, smiling more easily. Even my colleagues at the library have noticed the change. "You seem lighter," Mrs. Thompson, our head librarian, commented during story time last week. "Like you're finally allowing yourself to shine." Oliver is thriving in this new drama-free environment. Last Sunday during our weekly board game night, watching him giggle with Nathan over a particularly dramatic Jenga collapse I had an epiphany. This is what family should be: safe, loving, unconditional. My grandmother Margaret still visits, carefully timing her visits to avoid my parents' knowledge. Last week, she brought old photos of me as a baby that I'd never seen before. As I looked at them, pictures of a happy little girl who had no idea she'd spend decades trying to earn love that should have been freely given, I realized something profound. I'd finally done what no one else had done for that little girl. I protected her from those who never valued her life. In the children's section of my library, there's a quote I painted on the wall my first year here. The stories we tell ourselves define who we become. I'm finally telling myself a new story, one where I'm not the disappointing daughter or the defective sister, but a woman strong enough to choose life, love, and truth over toxic family bonds. The other day, during our bedtime story routine, Oliver looked up from his book and asked, "Mom, are you happy now?" Looking at my son's concerned face, so full of pure love and empathy, I could answer honestly, "Yes, sweetheart, I really am." Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is walk away from people who don't love you enough, even if they share your blood. Your boundaries are valid, your health matters, and your life has worth. I'm finally ready to write new, healthier chapters with the family I've chosen, the ones who genuinely want me alive to read them.